Welcome back to the Inner Journeys Outer Adventures podcast. Today with me, I have Mickey from Fit Foodies. Welcome, Mickey.
How's it going, sir? I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you here, man. So I've been doing this a lot, so I'm just going to ask you straight off the bat. What was your childhood like? Where'd you grow up?
Childhood was very, very, very colorful. So I grew up in Southern California, San Diego specifically, Southeast San Diego, if anyone is out there is very familiar. But I would say my background was so colorful that the hospital didn't want my parents to take me home. They actually stole me from the hospital because I was born with drugs in my system. And then from the time I was born till about middle school, like that didn't necessarily change. My parents made the choices that they did was like I said, colorful puts it lightly, or for most people could paint that perspective. And I kind of followed suit with some of that. Didn't grow up in the best neighborhood. I got into trouble. I think the first time I ever got into a fight, I actually got jumped, and I was 5 years old carrying a coin purse to go get change at a park. Right. And then it was that colorful moving forward. I got arrested, charged with 4 felonies when I was 17. So like very much a product of my environment, or I let that be my excuse. Until I got a little bit further down the road and decided that I can either let the world dictate what I'm going to be, or I can turn around and decide I can be whoever I want.
Yeah. Damn, dude. Holy shit. That's crazy. Okay, let's go back a little bit. Let's go back to like 15 to 17. So you are in this world. I'm gonna guess drug dealer. I'm not sure though.
So I mean, a little bit. I think I would say some people in that situation like Joe was entrepreneurial from day
Right.
one.
Yep.
So I actually the first thing I started selling was knives at school.
Okay.
And so like I would either acquire knives my own way, and then sell them out of my backpack at school. It escalated into different things, consumables. We did stupid things, stole a few cars, breaking into people's houses, things like that, just because in the neighborhood that's kind of what everyone did. And ran around with people on the streets and did what we did because who knows, right? We wanted to be cool, we wanted to have more. That's just what everyone was doing. Doesn't really matter. It's an interesting time because like I said, my parents had a history of drug use. They had actually turned their life around, so they were trying to be better. And that was when me and my siblings were starting to think for ourselves differently. So as they're trying to change their life, we're lying to them that we're being good, and then pursuing a similar path that they had just turned around from. But at that point in our life, that's all we had known.
Right.
So it's interesting for us. But yeah, so you weren't far off with your guess. It did turn into that. As I got further down the road, but it started out with selling knives at school, the whole pocket knives, and that was quite 12.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned it's all you knew. What do you think you like justified any of your actions back then, or do you think it was just, hey, this is life. This is all I know.
There was no need to justify.
Okay. All right.
There's no comparison, right? I think most of the time you justify if you feel like there's a comparison. I'm doing this because of whatever, but when it's all right? Like if you grow up speaking, a different language, you don't justify that that's your language. It's just the way you talk.
That's a good point. That's a good point and good reference, I would say, for that. Okay. Did you go to school? Did you pass and graduate high school?
So I did go to school. I wasn't the best student by any means. Neither one of my parents graduated high school, so they were big on like, hey, we had to graduate high school or we wanted to do all of this. So I did get my diploma. But full transparency, the only way that I did was by having other people do my work, or by being a little bit more of a bully or not a nice guy to get shit done. Or wagering with my teachers. So there was a couple classes that I got to pass because it was like, hey, cool, my teacher said one thing, I said something else. Like, all right, if we do this, or if I can prove this, then I'll get a passing grade. Like, all right, bet. And then friends with kids in the administrative office or things like that. So it's like, oh, like I probably would have flunked for never being in class, except for, we knew I had friends in the, roll call office or whatever it is. So they would remove my tardies or those types of things. So it's like, I skated by making relationships, we'll say. And then, I got expelled senior year, first day of senior year. And then, most of senior year, I was either in juvie or out of juvie or in court or on house arrest or some combination of all of those things. And so, for those of you that aren't familiar with that, when you're in juvenile or things like that, they have like school. It's a joke, but you go from like one place to another and they call it school. So like that made up for the majority of my credits for senior year. And then when I got released and the ability to go back to a normal high school, I had to go to a different district. And basically, like the school was like, I don't really know what to do with this. We'll just give you a diploma. So like, that was pretty much it. So like, I didn't do any of like the fun senior things. But they're like, hey, let's basically do like a GD test, or like, let's see if you could pass a few tests. So the high school gave me a few tests. I passed, and they were like, all right, we'll come back in a couple weeks and you can pick up your diploma. So like, I have it. It was definitely non-traditional.
Yeah, yeah. Holy cow, man! So you found ways to figure out how to get along, right? So you have relationships with other people. You're figuring out ways to cheat the system, or just keep progressing.
Yeah, you find it. We'll say solution oriented.
Yeah. I like
I
that.
say, people joke. It's like, oh, like entrepreneur from day one. I don't know if that's what I would have said back then, but it's like, hey, if I had something that I wanted done and I didn't want to do it, we'd figure out a way to get it done.
You're delegating, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, leadership.
Leadership for sure. Okay, what happened after you get your GED?
So I mean, my most of my family's in construction, so I just kind of followed suit. I started working construction. I mean, I was working construction before then. Sometimes that led to me, not going to school, because I would, be running projects or working on something, or I would, wake up to go to work with my dad or some of my family before school, and then decide to blow school off to do other things. But just continue to work construction. Me, my dad, and my brother opened a construction company at that time. So we did that for a few years. That actually helped me clean up or get on the right path. Actually, like getting arrested, facing some serious charges at 17, maybe kind of think, hey, like we should turn this around. And so that's when I started to be better by society's view. But realistically, like I didn't necessarily fix anything or change anything. I just started working all the time, and didn't give myself idle time. So I figured if I had time to myself, I would get into trouble. So I just started working nonstop from time I was 17 till 23 or 24. But once again, for those of you that are listening that are familiar with construction, worked hard, which also mean that I drank excessively from during that time, and lived off of caffeine, cigarettes, booze, and fast food. And so like from the time I was 17 till 18, I put on almost 100 pounds, and then kind of maintained there for a little bit. So ballooned up pretty quick, and then maintained there for a little bit, and that's kind of what led me to, Fit Foodies are turning my life around or helping people with fitness, because I gained 100 pounds pretty quick, and then was able to get 95 pounds off when I started to make other changes, even while working construction, and decided that I wanted to shift from construction into helping people be better people.
Yeah, let's dive into that. Like during that phase of you working in construction, you gained all this weight, and then at what moment did you realize like this isn't the life you want?
I don't know if I realized it.
Okay.
So like there wasn't necessarily like light bulb aha, like whatever. It was like rock bottom, like my pants didn't fit, or I didn't like bend over and like rip a hole in my jeans. It was more like I had a friend that had recently got out of prison, and he was just talking shit about how fat I got, and so I got tired of him teasing me, and so same thing. It was like, all right, go, like trying to wager my way out of it. It's like, all right, like if I can, I was like, what's going to take to get you to drop it? And for him, it was like, hey, like if you can do a single pull up, then I'll leave it alone. So I was like, all right, cool. Like I work construction. I picked it up all day. I'm pretty strong. So it's like, okay, like cool, let's do it. Went to the park, jumped up on a pull bar. I couldn't even like hold my own body weight, let alone pull it up. So like that was, I would say that would like more humiliating, like got to turn this around, but it wasn't like,
Okay.
I'm going to turn everything around. She's like, hey, like I should probably do something. And had a good enough friend to ride me hard enough for me to realize that I wasn't necessarily on a great path.
Yeah.
And he was like, hey, look, if you want, I can help you, exercise or whatever you want to call it. And at the time I was drinking excessively. He was 100% sober. And so his like only thing was, hey, look, like if we're going to do this, and we like show up to work out, you can't have had any beers or drinks prior to. Like, I don't care what you do after. I'm not saying you have to give it up. Just like, we're not going to work out if you show up smelling like beer. And so it's like, all right, cool. And so the big change was just like, rather than, start drinking in the middle of the day or on my way home from work, I started drinking after we worked out, which significantly reduced my calories.
How did you meet this friend?
He was actually a laborer that we had hired in construction. So he was a day laborer for a little bit, became really good friends. He went away for a little bit and then came back, and we picked him back up for work. So he was, for lack of better terms, an employee.
Okay. What age did you meet him?
I met him when I was in high school, I think the first time. And then when he kind of called me out, I think I was maybe 22, 21 or 22.
Okay.
Yeah. Because like I said, I was drinking heavily before 21, that's for sure. Yeah. But I think he probably, like when I started making change, around 21, 22.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, man, that's an awesome friend to find along the way.
Yeah, so he's a good guy, and like considerably older than me, so good, like we'll say, role model for certain things.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I mean, you always got to have somebody that you're looking up to. Like, hey, there's something about that person that I kind of like and I kind of want to model and have in my life.
For sure.
Did you have that thought, or is it just because he challenged you and you kept pushing you is the reason?
I think that like for me, I think a lot of stuff is, or at least at that point in my life, it was more like reflecting after that I realized what was going on or what had happened. And so like, in the moment, he was just someone that was like a hard worker. We'd hang out after work or do stuff. So like knew him. Wasn't really like I looked up to him and wanted to be like him. He rode me. I took it as a challenge, and so like, all right, cool. Like let's go from there, right? And then even our relationship kind of developed from there, because even after we would, work out, and once again, like it wasn't like a beautiful workout setup or like anything where like we were doing prison workouts with weight that we got from the swap meet. In my backyard or front yard while we were smoking cigarettes. So it wasn't like, oh, I got all healthy right away. And same thing for him. He still had some habits that weren't necessarily the best. So we would joke, there's like buff and puff. So we'd smoke cigarettes and lift weights. But then after that, I would crack a beer, we'd go buy pizza or go to the taco shop or whatever. And for him, when times that he was locked up, he was cook. So he's like, oh, like, hey, like we could do this, or rather than spending money or going out and do that, so let's just throw something in the crock pot and then we can just eat this afterwards. So like small little changes like that. But it was more just circle of influence rather than me saying, hey, I want to make change and this is the right person to help.
Okay. Yeah. So you're saying, so the circle of friends that you had is changing. So naturally, as that changes, you kind of start to change a little bit to fit in.
Yep.
Okay. I got you. All right. So when did you like lose all the 100 pounds that you gained?
I would say, yeah, and honestly, like who knows? Obviously, when you're big, you don't really step on the scale. It could have been more.
Yeah.
But I would say I probably lost it like when I got serious and focused. Probably took me about a year and a half to lose the 100 pounds. And then I just kind of maintained there for a few years. And so, I could go back, but if you do the math, probably, from 22 to 23, almost 24 is when I lost the weight. And then maintained around, I was a fairly like lean person, maintained around 155, 165 pounds for, years up until I was probably 31, 32. Um, uh, Me and my wife will potentially get to this. Opened a gym when I was right before I was 30.
Okay.
And after that, I started shifting the way that I worked out. So then I went from being super lean to putting on a little bit more mass. And right now I hang around 185.
Okay. Yeah. I'm pretty similar with that, weight wise at least. So, where are you in life at 24? So, when you've lost most of this weight, you're still in construction, I think, at that time.
Yep. So in construction, actually so once again, me and my dad, brother, we had the company, doing the best that we could with the company. We're super super loose with one of our biggest contracts because it was someone that we considered a close friend that ended up tanking our business, because paperwork is important, and even though you're good friends, sometimes you need to get things in writing. And so uh, that led to, I was still doing like kind of construction, but not necessarily. I was just doing contract work. I was contracted with Lowe's, Best Buy, Home Depot, most of the big box stores, just doing appliance delivery and installs. So I mean, I'm sure some of you bought a microwave and some dude comes up to into your house to put it in. That was me. So I did that for a couple years in Southern California, and then went up to Washington. Did it in Washington, but in Washington I did more deliveries and installs. Like the difference between a delivery and an install is installs take longer, so you have less appointments in a day. When I was doing installs, it's like 6 to 8 a day. When you do deliveries, it's like 25 to 30 a day. So it's just different type of whatever. But did that in Southern California. Did it in Washington for a little bit, and then came back to Southern California. Went back into installs before opening the gym or deciding that I wanted to do like fitness or health, nutrition, whatever, as a
Yeah.
way of life.
Yeah. So, during that time between where you go from Southern California to Washington and back, are you working out, or is it just the delivery work is like your workout then?
I know I was working out. Like there was no real like structure or plan to it, but yeah, I was definitely like working out like the same little like. I mean, it got better and better, but like I started out with a bench that I found in the alley somewhere, and then pig weight that we got from the swap meet. And then I got like, a nicer bench and some different weights and this, that, whatever. And then I took that weight set with me to Washington and then brought it back to Southern California. And it was always either like, in the backyard, the garage, or at one point it was in my bedroom. It's like the only thing that was there was like a mattress, and then like the weights like kind of hanging half over the bed. Um, and so like I did, but like I had no idea what I was doing outside of, what my friend had taught me. And basically it was just, pyramid sets, or, some form of progressive overload. Just go to failure at, every set, and then drop the weight and keep doing it until you can't pick up the body part that you're training. And I did it very, like, at that point, very infrequently. So just like, oh, cool. Like when I got off early enough, or this, that, whatever. And so like, it was intense, but sporadic. It was enough to make change. But like realistically, like I would say that with like the majority of the weight loss that I had, especially in the beginning, was just mostly attributed to massively reducing calories. Because like when I started working out, like I was drinking at least 30 beers a day. And so like even cutting that in half, like the amount of calories that you can consume from drinking that much alcohol, like, is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um, and so just like being more of a responsible human and not living off of alcohol, definitely like that helped. Um, and so like some was working out, but most of the transformation was, we'll say nutrition.
Yeah.
And like
Yep.
that's also like part of the reason that I focus, like our company now, the company that we have currently built, is so focused on nutrition. Because as fun as fitness is, the reality is like the biggest mover is going to be what you put in. And so for me, like even though I was working out, but like because you could say like construction is just as active, if not more active, than delivering appliances. Because like when I was working construction, I could be digging ditches or raising walls all day. If I'm doing appliance installs, like yes, the appliances can be heavy, but like most of it's drive time, or like laying on my back and everyone's seen the like stereotypical picture of a plumber. Like that was me. That's not super active. Just sit in my truck and then carry appliance in every once in a while. So like it wasn't that my job was super active. It's long days, but it had more to do about less going into my face than how much I was moving.
Right. Yep. You can never outwork a bad diet.
Yeah, we tell people like we joke with people that's like trying to out earn bad spending habits. Sure, you can always make more money, but if you don't get spending under control, it doesn't matter because you'll just adjust your spending to where it's like, all right, feels like, oh, I should need a raise. Like, yeah, and then you'll spend more money. That's fine.
Yep, exactly. Yep, you always just raise that spending.
Yeah.
Unless you're aware of it and you're like have a plan.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. As you reflect back on like most of the stuff we just talked about in your life, what do you think comes to mind?
I think and this was like I said, a lot of for me is like looking back over the years, like all right, like what happened, why happened, and then getting to the point where I was like, okay, like can I purposely recreate some of these things because like you said, some of them in the beginning was just based on surroundings, especially in my younger years, like all right, like getting into trouble is just because that's what I was surrounded by, and then making changes that was just like circle of influence, right? So that's like all right, cool. Like the first thought there after reflection was like all right, like if I expose myself to more, then maybe I could be capable of more because I have new circles and be around different people, right? Because to the point that we talked about earlier with getting into trouble, it's like I didn't know any better, right? Or like I literally had nothing to reference against, right? Because this is just how life is, and so and that's part of the reason I think me and my wife travel a lot is just to be exposed to different things and see what is actually possible out there.
Yeah.
And so it would be like exposing yourself to more, but then I think for me it was realizing that at least for with the weight was that like if you're intentional with the things that you do, you can control the outcome far more than people think. And so for me, it was like, all right, cool. Like that started with my physical appearance. And then after that, I was like, oh, cool. Like, does that principle hold to relationships, finance, business, life? Because like for me, like before we opened the gym, like I was, not, and so like a bad spending habit. Like I was just like shitty at life. But then it was like, all right, cool. Like if I could put focus energy into controlling the way that I look, could I put focus energy into having better relationships, making more money, having a successful business or like whatever it is. And just being willing to test that and realize like, all right, cool. Like if you can control or if you're intentional about controlling the inputs, then the outputs are also in your control. But I think that most people focus on the output and they want to control the outcome without controlling the input. And it's like, it doesn't actually work that way. That would be like, oh, like, I'm just going to step on the scale every day and then I'm mad that I don't lose weight. It's like, well, you're doing nothing to change what you see on the scale. And that's what most people do is like they blindly do things and hope that the outcome changes. Whereas like you have to be more intentional with inputs and actions and then measure the result of those inputs to then drive the results.
Yeah.
But they all kind of work together.
Yeah. So you said something there like based off what you could do with your body and changing your body that you decided, hey, I tried this. Now I'm going to test this in different areas of my life. Is that basically how the thought process went? You think? Okay.
Oh, for sure. At that point,
you started experimenting a bunch of different things?
I mean, I think at first it was like I was heavy into like Spartan races or things like that. If you're familiar with them, that's actually how me and my wife met. But so it was like, all right, cool. Like at first it was just changing the way that we look or the way that I look, but then it was like if I intentionally try to improve performance, could I improve performance? So it was a derivative of health or whatever. And then it was with business or performance at work. So if I'm intentional with getting more installs and not necessarily skating by, can I better control, either my finances or the way I show up or like all of those things. And then the biggest jump, it was kind of twofold, was the relationship with my wife. So being intentional about the way that I showed up in our relationship, because me and my wife set our wedding date within 2 weeks of meeting each other prior to that, my longest relationship was less than a year. So to go from like not being able to be around someone for 12 months to knowing that I want to spend the rest of my life with someone after meeting them for 2 weeks is a huge shift. And it was just the matter like of the intention that I put into the relationship and how I showed up. And then the second part of that is like shortly after meeting me and my wife decided to go into business together.
Yeah.
And it was like, all right, cool. Like just be, intentional with the inputs to control the, output. And so like our first year of meeting each other was, by most people, probably very stressful. We met, we got engaged, got married, opened a business. We went from not living with each other to living inside of our brick and mortar gym that we opened. So like we were both living separate. The first time we ever lived together was sleeping in a small space inside of our business. So like and like working together. It was like, there's a lot of couples like, oh, I could never work with my spouse. So try to go from like, having separate spaces to living, working, breathing all within like everything. Right. But like it was like we loved it. It was great for us, but just an extreme example of hey, if you're intentional with like the inputs, you can very well control the output. And we'll say stress testing a relationship.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think there's any bigger stress test for a relationship than what you went through. I was just curious, like when you're talking about being intentional with relationships, and you go from meeting your wife at a Spartan race to 2 weeks later wanting to get married, like what do you mean by that intentional part of that? Like, if you could explain that a little bit.
Yeah, I would say with our relationship specifically, I showed up very different. So like in every past relationship, I would try to be what I thought the other person wanted me to be. Right? It's like I had no idea what they actually wanted me. I just pretended that I knew, and I would try to live into that. Right.
Right.
And that's part of the reason why my relationships didn't last, because they were fake, right? To some degree, right? Or it's like I was trying to be someone or something that I wasn't to please another person. And you can only do that for so long.
Right.
Whereas like my wife, when I first met her, like you could almost joke that I tried to scare her away. Like, oh, like this is all my baggage. These are like the shitty parts of who I am. These are the things that like I probably wouldn't want to tell anybody. And airing all of that out and having someone say like, cool, and I still want to be with you. I was like, oh, well, that's extremely refreshing or nice. But she also did the same. So like the beginning of our relationship, like we didn't talk about what most people talk about. Like I like didn't know her favorite color, what movie she like. We didn't talk about music or past relationships because like it's all kind of bullshit anyways. Like the type of movies that she liked isn't going to mean that like we're going to have a great relationship, right? And then even like knowing what her past relationships were doesn't really help me paint a good picture of the future that we're going to have. Realistically, like a lot of people like, oh, it's beneficial to know, but it's like if you're dating a girl and she's like, oh, hey, look, like I've never had sex. She's like, oh, like you automatically come up with whatever, like you paint your picture of why that happened. But if she also says, hey, look, I've banged every dude that I've ever shook hands with, oh, like then you paint your own picture of like why that is, right? And so like the funny part is that like in asking those questions before you actually know someone, then you start to label them with something based on past actions. And the reality is like that doesn't do your future relationship any good. And so for us, when we got to know each other, it was more about like the people that we are now and the people that we wanted to become, because that was more important. And everything that I did in my past or everything that she did in her past made her who she was today. And I appreciate that. But learning some of the like finer details of like how I may have treated a past relationship would only make her doubt my ability to be a good partner in the future. And the same thing would go for her. Like if I would have learned some of the things that she like, and now we know everything about each other, but in the beginning, like it would do nothing but harm us because now it's going to seed doubt, or I'm going to label her as something, or she's going to label me as something because I made a mistake in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. And for a lot of people, they grow through those relationships. So just because you did something wrong in the past doesn't mean you're going to repeat it. I mean,
yep. And the hard part is that like they tell you something like that, and then like now you don't really know the person standing in front, but now you're judging. Like, oh, this guy's a dick, and it's like, well, maybe he was a dick and he's nicer now. or like she was this, and like you said, like they grew and they learned through that. But what happens is you hear that and you just think, oh, once of this, always of that. It's like, well, not necessarily, right? So like that was a huge difference for our relationship, and it's massively helped. It also allowed us to be able to communicate very differently because like we can share stuff without feeling, judged or criticized or whatever. If I tell something to her, she tells something to me. It's like, oh, like it doesn't affect us in a negative way, right? There's
Yeah.
no punishment for doing so. And then allows us to just be very open about what we need or want from each other. I think a lot of times people, they want something and they assume that their partner knows, and they get mad when their partner doesn't do it. It's like really fucking fine, right? And it's like you have to let them know, hey, look, this is how I define a happy relationship, or this is what I need from you. And you also have to be willing to do that on a regular basis, because what I need from my wife now is very different than what I needed from her when we first got married, right? Or when we first met. And a lot of times people, similar to dieting, it's like, oh, I did keto once and it worked for me. It's like, cool, maybe then, maybe it's not going to work now. And so like things aren't that, black and white, or they're not that rigid, right? Like,
Right.
same thing, like what worked for you when you were 2, like you shit your pants. It doesn't work now, right? So it's like,
Nobody's gonna come wipe your ass.
yeah, but people don't apply that logic to everything else in their life. It's, yeah, at one point in your life, this, like, sure, you did. It was socially acceptable for you to go to the bathroom in your pants. Now, like, it would be a little bit weird in most societies. But when it comes to relationships or dieting or whatever, it's like, oh, well, this is what I did that one time and it works. So I'm just gonna do it forever. It's like, well, that's stupid.
Yeah.
And so, like, in our relationship, we realize that we're both, human beings. We have a fluid relationship. Things change. The needs that we have, the desires that we have as we, move around, as we grow as people, as our business changes, like we'll be different. So we have to communicate those things to each other, because they don't know, or she won't know unless I tell her that something should change. And she'll operate off of an old thing. And obviously, like I said, very similar to like when you're trying to make a lifestyle change, if it is diet or exercise, like unless you tell your family, like they don't know. And for them, maybe your entire life, a good time was eating cake and drinking beers till you passed out. Now you have a different definition of fun, and your family is not trying to sabotage you every time they pull out a piece of cake. They just know this is what you used to like to do.
Right.
So you have to tell them, hey, look, I have a new definition of fun. I still love you, and I'm going to love you regardless. But like my definition of fun has changed, and I'm not going to love you any less because I don't want to eat your cake. Right? Like whatever. But like you have to be willing to have those conversations, and most people assume that that the people in their life know what they're doing, when they don't.
Yeah, the damn assumptions. Like, you should just know what's going on in my brain. I don't have to tell you. You should just know.
Yeah. Or you expect other people. It's very similar. Like, in life you have expectations. Like, and like I said, even in a relationship or a family, it's like, oh, like I expect to, wake up and get a cup of coffee or do all this, and then I don't communicate with my wife that that's going to happen, and she wakes up and she's in the kitchen when I'm supposed to be getting my coffee. Now I'm mad at her because she wrecked my plans, and she didn't fucking know it.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
It wasn't on purpose. And so it comes down to like even little things like that people overlook. So they think like, oh, no big deal. They plan their own day in their own head, and they don't tell anyone else about it. And they get mad when someone else ruins it. It doesn't even have to be in a relationship. Like it's like anything, right? Like the person at the gas station took longer. How dare they? It's like, well, like they had no idea that you wanted to leave 5 minutes later for work.
Dude, that's so good. That is so good. I don't think I could ever say it that well. I mean, eventually probably, but that was really well articulated.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go into like you and your wife in business. So you guys slept on the floor of the gym that you started.
So like it wasn't that extreme.
Well, interim.
Yeah. Well, so I said like, fortunately for me, my background was in construction, right? So we found a commercial space that we could turn into a gym. It had a small little front office. It used to be like a clothing manufacturing like warehouse. So I had a small front office, and then it had a storage room upstairs. So what I did is I turned the storage room upstairs into a small studio. So like, because I had a background in that, I could do so like we did have our own little living space, but we did live like in the facility. So it wasn't as crazy as like, for those of you who know Alex Hermosi, we weren't sleeping with a sleeping bag in the middle of the, like on the turf. Even though there was nights we did that just because it was fun. Like, and eventually we put like a huge projector in our gym so we could have like movie nights. Like we did on purpose, but like we had our own little like studio above the gym. And once again, like in regards to being intentional with inputs. We knew that it was going to be hard to get the business off the ground. It's like, how can we conserve costs, but how can we also not hate life by doing? Because obviously, like we could have slept on the floor, but there's a potential that we would have got to the point where like we would have just hated the fucking facility. So it's like, all right, cool.
Right.
If this is this is going to be our home, how can we actually enjoy it? Right.
Yeah.
So we figured out like, all right, cool. Like, how do we want to sleep? Like we had our own little, like, like little, shower, bathroom, kind of like, kitchenette, like everything upstairs. It was just like hot plates. It was like, all right, like we can wash dishes. We have some hot plates. We have a microwave. We put a grill because we had an outdoor space for the gym. So we put a grill outside. So like, oh, okay, cool. We made it seem like, oh, we can do customer appreciations, but I was just how we prepped all of our food because like we didn't have a full kitchen. So, all right, cool. We just throw all our meat on there, put it in the fridge upstairs. So like when we did it, we knew that like, hey, like this is probably going to be the most cost effective way to do this. So how can we do it in a way that like makes sense so we don't hate life? So it was very intentional. We built it. We decided like that's how we wanted to live there. So like it wasn't as crazy as like, hey, we're here and we're going to sleep in this commercial building, even though that's what it was. We try to make it as nice as possible.
Yeah.
For that situation. And then as after we moved out, then it turned into like, oh, it's like an employee lounge or whatever. So like, and our employees liked it. It's cool,
Okay.
like whatever. But like, and same thing in the beginning. Like, we also wanted it to be as discreet as possible. So like, we had a futon that folded into a couch. Like, if someone did go up there and we like put it all, like it could just look like, oh, this is like a lounge or a private area or whatever. But it was where.
Yeah. So you and your wife met during a Spartan race. You get married. You want to go into business. What made you guys want to open a gym?
So she did.
Okay.
No, well, so when we first met, so we met on course at World Championship Spartan Race. Fun fact: we also got married at World Stephen's Mutter, so we just like kept the whole OCR thing going. Yeah, but when we first met, she wanted to open it because her background, she is an ER nurse, so she did that for about 10 years, and she wanted to get out of the ER to help people like stay out because like for her she's like, oh, it's like a revolving door, Band-Aid, like send it back out. I would love to be able to do this. And she was also obviously she's doing Spartan races, like the fitness aspect of it. So it's like, oh, cool, like this is great. But then also like she started doing Spartan races to prove to herself that she can overcome challenges, right? So I was like, oh, cool, like if I do this hard thing, there's other things in my life that I can do, because she was married before and then getting divorced. Like, all right, like I can prove that like I can do these things. Like that's what got her in the Spartan race, and then she wanted to get out of the hospital. So we want to help people have that same type of like connection with doing hard things and growing, right? And so she was talking with people and like actively trying to, or like saying, oh, like there was someone that she like was a friend, but like a potential business partner. So it was like, oh, like because he was a trainer. So it's like, okay, cool. Like we could come up with something. So when I first met her, she said that like she like what one of her goals was she wanted to open a gym, and she was like taking steps towards that. But then after dating, like she was like, oh, she would have like, oh, we're going to meet up with my potential business partner and talk about business. And then after the meeting, it's like, oh, like how'd it go? I was like, oh, well, like it didn't really go anywhere. And then like after that happened a few times, it was like, oh, like it doesn't really seem like it's going to happen, at least not this way, right? And so I was like, is this something that you actually want to do? And she said yes. And I was like, all right, how do you feel about doing it together? Because like whoever you're trying to do it with now is obviously dragging their feet. I have no idea how to run a gym, neither do you, whatever. But like if there's something you want to do, like let's just fucking do it together. And so she was like, yeah, let's do it. So it was something that she had and she was like potentially like or trying to pursue. But it wasn't moving forward with the people that she was doing it with. So we decided in more than one way to get in bed together, and decided like, all right, cool, we'll do this. And so we decided to that like officially that we would do it in February. It was like, all right, like February is when we sat down and we're like, yes, like let's actually make it happen. And then we opened right after her birthday in July. So it was pretty quick from concept to open for the gym.
That's awesome, man. And how long did you guys own the gym?
For about 3 years.
Okay. What was like so what's the progression of that business for 3 years?
Well, the beginning there, it was like fucking tanking, losing money. We were like, living in the facility. It was basically we just had our own private gym, and we lived there by ourselves. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
no, because like I mean, realistically, like when we opened the business, like we had no idea what we were doing in regards to like running a business. We knew how to work out, we knew how to train. Like we were very naive, and we're just like, hey, like we'll build a gym that we would want to train in, and it was like fill the gym. If we build it, they will come, right? Like so for us, it was like, hey, look, like we built our dream facility at the time because like that's what we thought people wanted, right? So we did that, and we had a hell of a time filling it up, right? And especially like I mean, we both had decent connections and influence in the Spartan community, in the OCR community, and so like everyone like is very supportive. I'm like, oh, like if you had a gym, I'd come train there. And then when they heard that they had to pay to come, then I was like, maybe not, because we could just train outside like we've always done. Um, I mean, and because we didn't know much about business, we were also like, hey, look, like some of these gyms just charge way too much money. What we want to do is create an awesome space that's dirt cheap for people to come. We don't want to train them. We just want to give them the keys to the kingdom, have them give us a couple dollars, and then great. But one, it was a lot harder than we expected to get people into the facility, and to give us even the little bit of money that we were asking for. And then once you started to do the math, I was like, oh, even if the facility was packed, we wouldn't even be able to cover the fucking bills. So like this whole thing does not work. Um, and people come in and it's like, oh, like, can you tell me what to do? And so it's like, oh, we didn't really want to train people. So at first, like we were just like working out with everyone that came in, but that gets fucking exhausting because you can't work out with everyone that comes into the
Yeah.
gym. We tried. And so I was like, all right, like this doesn't work either. So like, all right, we got to figure something out. And For your audience, I don't know how familiar you are with Alex Hormozi. I know he's gaining more and more popularity. But that was back in the beginning of his gym launch phase when he was just kind of taking off. So I think he had just started doing like Facebook ads for gym launch, and our gym, as much as we loved it at that point, was probably so sad or so pathetic that one of the few members that we had who wasn't actually paying, he was just a friend that we would let come to the facility, saw the ad and sent it to us. He was like, you should probably call this guy because
Oh,
no
God.
one's ever
Yeah.
at your gym. So like very thankful for that friend and love him for doing so, but probably also not a very good sign that you have a good business when your customers are like, hey, obviously your business is struggling.
Yeah.
Um, so we jumped on a call, with Alex. He sold us on the dream. We were super excited. We were like, yes, let's do this. We took, a little bit more of the money that we had and threw it into that. And it completely changed, our business. We started to get more and more people in. We had to successfully advertise. We were at the point where we could bring on employees. We were able to move out of the facility. We grew fairly well once we started to implement the things that they taught or trained us on. And then funny enough, like we actually started transitioning to, and this is like, once again, don't know how familiar you or your audience is with the progressive gym launch, but they had like, it was basically for, brick and mortar gyms to fill their gym. And then they started doing what they call like a hybrid model where so people could train outside of the facility because they were going to start selling to like trainers and coaches and like things that don't necessarily have a gym. But then after doing that, they realized probably not a good idea. So now they're back to working with just gyms. I still think they have a hybrid model. But before they actually launched the hybrid model, my wife and I started testing what it would be like to have people come into the gym and sell them on not using our facility. We're just like, all right, cool. Like, yes, our facility is awesome. Yes, it's not whatever, but wouldn't it be more beneficial for us to train you like in your apartment gym or 24-hour fitness or someplace that maybe has showers or that's open 24 hours a day or like whatever. And so we had got to the point where we were a little over 70% of our business was remote. So the majority of our client base wasn't even coming into our facility, which was nice because we got to keep a small, like tight knit family inside of the, our gym. It wasn't overcrowded. And we just incentivized people to, train away from there. But that ultimately is what allowed us to be able to sell the business, is because when we did, we actually didn't sell like the gym and all of that. We sold our accounts receivable. So we sold our membership base because they didn't need the facility. So we sold the membership base and then liquidated the facility. So like our gym is 1,000% gone. So it's like it never happened. So our members, like the company that we sold them to, they still hold a handful of the members. So it's like it worked out really well for them because it's been 4 years since. But it was an interesting progression. Went from like struggling, sleeping, inside the facility to having a facility that we saw growing really well. Experience like, all right, cool. Like, how can we get more out of this? So make more money with the gym without necessarily like exploding it. And that's something that we learned from Gym Launch, where it's like, hey, look, like for a lot of people when they open the gym, it's like the math doesn't work, right? Because there's only so many people they can fit in here. And so it's like, all right, like if you're going to charge this much, how many people can you like actually like before you cap out the facility, like legitimately cap it out? And if you need or want to make more money outside of that, how do you do so? Right. So like they were, instrumental in teaching us to think a little bit outside the box. Like, all right, cool. Like if we can only fit this many people, because they were pushing us to do like bigger and bigger classes. We like to keep our classes small. So we would cap our classes, like, cause we were doing class workouts at that time, like even with our trainers or whatever, but we capped it at like 16 to 20 people. So it's not a very big class. And it's for almost 5,000 square foot facility. Like that's pretty close. And we would have 2 trainers per class. So it's pretty like intimate settings. And their business model, what they were like wanted us to do was more like, all right, like have a large group session with like 30 to 50 people and then have a small group session and then do one-on-one training. And then that's how you can do, kind of progress up.
Right.
And we challenged that logic by like, all right, cool. Like rather than doing, that, could we just sell people to not train here and give them meal plans, workouts, like all that kind of fun stuff to do outside of the facility. So we just started selling basically workouts and meal plans, and the ability for them to either come into the facility or message us and ask us questions so we can coach them on how to figure out how to do it not here.
Yeah. So I'm sure that inspired what you're doing now, the Fit Foodies and the app that you have.
For sure. So like actually, after we were done with our gym was called Just Go Lift. So after Just Go Lift, I actually went to work for Trevor Cashy, which was Alex's best friend. So I went to run their sales and marketing. My wife joined their team as a coach. So I got to learn even more about coaching. Fun side note. Also, Trevor coached us nutritionally, and that really helped our business. And that changed the way that we like look, feels. Like I talked about, like, me putting on lean mass being a little bit different. So like Trevor was instrumental in that, because when we opened the gym, we were very much like max effort. Like we did sparring races. It's like, just work really hard and be really restrictive and like all this stuff. Like if you want it bad enough, you'll fucking do it.
Yeah.
Embrace the suck, because like if you don't, then you don't really want it. But in running and growing the business, like we got to the point where we couldn't put that much time and energy into the way that we looked and felt, or like we just couldn't train that much anymore, and we couldn't put that much time into like all of the things that we used to do to maintain our physique, right? So it got to the point where I was like, all right, like, well, what do we do? Do we sacrifice the way that we look so that we can pour into the business? But then like, can we really justify owning a health and nutrition or health and fitness business if we also shit the bed when it comes to the way that we take care of ourselves, which is like kind of a weird spot. And you see a lot of people in the industry, like as they grow their business, their health starts to suffer because they put themselves on the back burner and they pour into the business. So for us, it's like, we didn't want that to be the case. And Alex is in great shape, obviously. And so for him, he introduced a lot of the gym lords to Trevor. He's like, hey, look, like this is the answer. Or this is how I do it. If you want to like get jacked and still stack cash, then like this is who you want to learn from. So we learned from Trevor. That's how we got like a relationship with him. It's like him and his like team coached us on nutrition. So we were able to be way more efficient and flexible with our nutrition. So we went from, training every day or twice a day in some cases to only training 3 or 4 days a week. And being actually smart about nutrition versus like, I just eat clean or this, that, whatever. Cause like we were meal prepping, but like we had no idea what the fuck we were doing. It was just like, like clean ingredients or whole foods, or like, if you can't read what's on the label, it's bad for you. It's like, it's stupid. And so like learning from Trevor allowed us to be able to have a broader look at what was really important when it came to nutrition. So we applied that to ourselves. We applied it to our people within the gym. And then after my wife went to like work with him on the coaching side, learn even more. Um, and so like when we were working with him or after we sold the gym, we've basically traveled off and on for the last almost 4 years, like around the nation, kind of chasing down food that we want to try or eat or whatever. So like when we had the gym and we were, eating a little bit more restrictively, like a lot of people, we'd send each other like food porn on Instagram or social media. It's like, oh, like I wish I could eat this kind of deal, right? And then once we learned how to eat it, and then we weren't tired of the facility, it's like, all right, fuck it, like let's do it. So we just traveled around the nation to all the places that we had found on Instagram that looked amazing, and doing that is what kind of spawned the Fit Foodies idea. Because it was like, all right, cool. Because obviously, like, there's people that do, like that teach all kinds of like food philosophies. There's also like macros, this whatever. Obviously, like Trevor does what he does. Like we took everything that he taught us and applied it to what we do now. But we wanted to be able to put together a program and a package that gave people what we call more like food freedom, to show them, hey, cool, like sure, if you want to be restrictive, if you wanted that, you can, but really educating them on how to look at their nutrition and apply what's important to them to their life, right? Because if you want to eat all whole foods, like fantastic. If you want to eat one meal a day, sure, like go for it. Like we teach people how to do all of that. It's not necessarily about one modality. It's just like understanding what's important. So then you can apply it to your life in whatever way you enjoy, because different strokes, like everyone wants something different. And to our point earlier, it's like what you want will change as well. Right. And so like the way that me and my wife used to do it looks very different than how we do it today. And so it's like, as we've changed, like the foundation for the nutrition is exactly the same. We just apply it different because life is different. And so that's what we try to do, is like teach people like the fundamentals and the foundation of nutrition so they can apply it to their life however they want. And who knows, maybe that means like when they're on vacation, they can apply it and it looks different because they're on vacation. That also doesn't mean that like, oh, when they're on vacation, fuck it, I'm just gonna cheat or treat myself, like whatever. Like that's stupid. We joke that like food, you have a relationship with your food, and it should be like any other relationship. If you look at your relationship with your spouse, it shouldn't be something that you want to cheat on. If it is, then you probably have a shitty relationship, right? Or if you do it enough, someone's gonna get in trouble. So it's like, all right, cool. Like just build a relationship with your food that you don't need to cheat on, which means, hey, every once in a while, if you want to get a little strange, you can, but it still fits in your plan. It's like us traveling around and doing like kind of pushing the boundaries with our own food is what spawned, Fit Foodies, the teaching. Like, all right, cool, like how to do what we do and the way that we do it. Because like I said, there's a lot of people out there that teach like the fundamentals of the stuff, but they don't necessarily like to push the limits, so to speak, the way that we do. Because also like we catch a lot of pushback. It's like, oh, like how can you be a nutrition company, health company, and you eat this, or how can you? It's like, get out of here. And so like, and like people get all crazy with whatever they believe, and who knows, maybe it makes them feel better. Like fantastic, right?
Yeah, that's the thing about nutrition is people have their like stance, and they don't ever want to change their stance on what they believe it should be.
Yeah, it's funny. One of our friends, he likes to joke. So he's a nutrition coach. Well, he's actually the head of human performance for Superhuman. So John Matson's program. His name's Ben Oliver. He's an amazing human, but he likes to joke that like, because he's a nutrition as well. He's like, how come nutrition is the only industry that you're in that like as soon as you let people know, they give you advice on how to do your job, right? So it's like, I was like, oh, I need nutrition. Oh, and then someone says, oh, keto's the best, or this, that, whatever. It's like, that's really weird, because if you were to introduce yourself and say, I'm a doctor, they're not going to start recommending health cures or how to perform a surgery or what's the best. Like they don't even, like when it comes to nutrition, like they don't even ask questions. They just tell you what's the best. And it's like,
exactly.
How is that like, if I'm like, that's so weird, because in almost no other profession, when someone finds out what you do they start telling you how to do your job. And it's like, wow, this is very interesting, interaction, but thanks for your feedback. I'll take that under advisement. But so yeah, that's kind of what obviously we get questions when we travel around and this, that, whatever, and so we wanted to create something to answer some of those questions and we used to do, high end one-on-one coaching. Obviously, like we've had the benefit and privilege of knowing and meeting some of the best in the industry when it comes to that. But there is also the reality that not everyone can afford some of those programs. And so we built Fit Foodies to get as close to what it would be like to work with someone like Trevor or like one of John's coaches, but at an affordable rate. Because we built it into an app, it's more of a linear program. So like we define it more as a program versus like coaching, because we're not going to be there to wipe your ass or slap food out of your hand. But we will give you, everything that you need. You get, different task lessons, things to learn week by week. There's check-ins, there's corrections, there's things to do. But we wanted to create as close to a one-on-one coaching relationship for people without the price tag. So we wanted to be able to have that, food freedom or that like ability to do that. That does come with, some very expensive one-on-one coaching. But put it into a package that if someone, like actually wants to make change, then money won't be what stops them.
Right. Yep. That's awesome, dude. What's one of the basic principles of your program?
Nothing's good or bad.
Yeah. I say that all the time.
Yeah. I mean, things just are. Right. And it's like, cool. And same thing when it goes to yourself, like maybe you like cake. That's fine. Maybe like you like beer. That's fine. Like I have a fridge next to me full of beer right now in my office because I like it so much. I have hops tattooed on my arm. This is a beer logo. So like I still drink alcohol or beer daily, right? Like we talked about earlier in my life, I drank excessively all the time. I still drink almost daily. I just know how to do it in a way that's beneficial to me or use it as a tool, right? So like sure, there's going to be some people that's like, oh, like any amount of alcohol is poisonous. Sure, I like to say like, hey, the dose makes the poison. And if me having a drink or two a day or a little bit more on certain days like means that I don't live to be 200, but I have a full life doing so, like that's fine with me. Like I'm okay with that. Everything is like give and take, doesn't make it good or bad. It's just for me, it's like I would like to get more out of my years than to get more years out of me. So like that's fine. And figuring out a way that allows you to do that with the best quality of life is where we try to show people. And so like we don't force them to adhere to anything. We just give them the information so that they can make the decision on their own. And so it's like cool. It's not good or bad. Doesn't really matter. Look at the information, decide how you want to move forward. So that's a very long-winded way of saying one of the foundational principles is it's not good or bad, and do your best to remove labels because everyone's going to tell you what is or isn't. It's like decide for yourself. No one can tell you what healthy looks like for you. Like maybe it's sub 10% body fat. Great for other people. Maybe it's a little bit more flexibility with their food and they have visible definition, but they're they don't have veins visible in their abs. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like define that for yourself. I'm not saying that being 400 pounds obese is like big is beautiful. But like you should be able to define healthy for yourself. And maybe that's not a six pack. Maybe it's something different. But define it for yourself and then do whatever combination of things helps you live that life.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to what you've said a lot in this podcast is being intentional, like being intentional with the inputs and know what the outcome you want to have is.
Yeah. And doing it away like, and like for us, it's like, I mean, obviously we talk about like things change. But like when you start doing something, do it with the intention to do it for the foreseeable future. A lot of times when people jump into nutrition or fitness, it's like, oh, what can I do to get this result? And the finish line is the result, not how could I do this forever, right? And so it's like life is a game that you have to keep playing until you die. So figure out how you want to play it for the rest of your life because you're going to have to keep showing up every day. And if you do something to get a result in a way that has you hate getting out of bed, then it's probably not worth doing. And so it's like, and that's where the like, sub 10% body fat for some people may come in. Cause it's like, oh, like maybe being bodybuilder lean is miserable for you because of what you have to do to be there. So like maybe you can't do it for the foreseeable future. So like, great. I mean, I've had visible abs for the last 10 years. So like, you can do that and still like enjoy food. A lot of people think, oh, like, it's either abs or great food. Not necessarily, maybe depending on how you get them. Um, but when you do apply something like for change or improvement in your life, do something that you can see yourself doing for the foreseeable future until you decide that you want something different or you want to take a different approach. Because then it becomes really easy to keep showing up. If you like, and everyone's like, oh, like love the journey. It's like if you can't talk yourself into loving fucking chicken and veggies as the only thing that you eat if you don't actually like it.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, like, what do you like? How can you use it as a tool? What's something that you could do for the foreseeable future? Because like maybe the approach that you take doesn't get you there as fast, but you can blow past the finish line if it's something that you can keep doing, right? Because even for me, like I think I'm a firm believer in the only reason I was able to get the results or have the body that I have now is because I didn't take an extreme approach. Like we talked about the change that I had. Like I didn't do anything extreme in the beginning. Like I started lifting weights and smoking cigarettes with a friend in the backyard. Like that's not extreme. I had a few less beers a day.
Yeah.
Right. If I would have went from like how I was living to trying to meal prep and do all this crazy shit so I could drop 50 pounds in the next 6 months, like I would have shot the bed 2 weeks in, and hated myself. Right. And so I was like, all right, like what's something you commit to? Maybe you won't get there as fast, but I can get like, because when I was, 100 pounds heavier, there's no way that I thought I would look the way that I do now. I didn't think it was possible.
Right.
And like I could have started with the intention to lose 20 pounds, and then fell off. Right. But because it was like, what's something that I can do today, push for a little bit better, sustainable growth, progress, and like over a couple of years, it makes for better results than you ever thought possible. But everyone wants it right now. They want to do it in 6 weeks, or minus 2 days or whatever. And then they white knuckle it, and then they either never get there or they balloon back up. Right. It's like, all right, cool. Yep. Like maybe expand the time horizon and shoot for a bigger goal. Like that's fine. And like, sure, if you want, there's times where you can gas it or ramp it up a little bit if you want to, like, get there a little bit faster. Because once again, it is all give and take. Maybe if it's going to take you 10 years, you're going to give up. So it's like, all right, feather the throttle a little bit every once in a while to shave some time off. But like going 0 to 100 in hopes of, cutting the timeline into, a fraction of what it could be is stupid. Because then most people just get frustrated and they give up and they just like, oh, it's not possible, or that's when it's their hormones are a problem, or they're a special snowflake, and they're someone that can starve themselves and still gain weight, which is why all the kids in Africa are overweight, obviously. And so it's like, just figure out what you can do, and you'd be surprised at what you can do if you just keep doing.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, Mickey. I'm so glad to have you on this podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Of course. It's been fun. I feel selfish. I feel like I've talked the entire time.
Kind of the point. Kind of what I want. Makes it easy on me. That was great, man. You had a lot of knowledge, and there's a lot of life that has happened to you, and you seems to have grown through every single stage of it and still growing to this day. So, man, you got a very interesting story, and all of the knowledge that you've had to this day is very valuable.
Thank you. I feel like if I don't learn from experience, it's kind of a wasted experience. There's no point in getting kicked in the dick if you don't learn from it.
Yeah, because you don't want to keep getting kicked in the dick every single day.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you for listening to the Inner Journeys Outer Adventures podcast. We'll see you next time.